Hey there! In today's video, I'm going to show you how to do the crocodile stitch, or the dragon scale stitch. It's been called several things. So I am also going to show you how to modify it if you want it to be spikier or smaller. And there's different ways that you can play around with this stitch. I'm really excited to get into this tutorial. So what you're going to need is some yarn. I have got this worsted weight. It's just Red Heart Super Saver tweed, I believe. And you'll need a hook. I'm using a larger size. This is a 6mm, so that you'll be able to see my stitches really easy. And I know I normally have a white background, but since the yarn is white, I figured I'll go for a slightly darker background so you can see what I'm doing pretty clearly. So to start your practice sample, we're going to make a slip knot, and then we're going to chain a multiple of 6 plus 4. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 18 and then add 4 chains onto that. Okay, so now I've got my chain, and what we're going to do is start our first double crochet, and we're going to work into the 4th chain from the hook. So yarn over, work a double crochet, and now this chain 3 right here counts as a double crochet, and it will count as a double crochet as we move forward. So we're going to chain 2, we're going to skip 2 chains, and then work a double crochet increase, otherwise known as a 2 double crochet in the same stitch, like so. And then we're going to repeat this to the end of the row. So chain 2, skip 2, double crochet increase. Okay, so you should have something that looks a bit like this. And this is our very first base row. The dragon scale stitch is worked over a 4-row repeat. Now this base row does not count in that repeat, but it's a good example of what we're going to be working on top of. So when we start the repeats, I will add them on the screen. They'll be highlighted so we can check on which one we're on. We're basically going to be alternating between a scale row and a base row, a scale row and a base row. So to start our first scale row, we're going to rotate our work so that it is vertical, and we've got our hook up here at the top and our base down here towards us. We're going to chain 3. Remember, this initial chain 3 counts as a double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, and we're going to work around the post of this double crochet right here. So we're going to go in between the increases, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2, and then pull through 2 to create our double crochet. So now, because this chain 3 counts as a double crochet, we're going to work 4 more double crochets. So I've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's the first side of our first scale. Now what we need to do is kind of create a point where it's going to curve around, and then we can work the second side of the scale. And to do this, we're just going to chain 1. Now we're going to rotate the work so that it's the opposite way. Now we've got this side of the scale facing us and this end of our project facing away. And then we're going to now work around this post right here. So again, insert your hook in between the increases, and then we're going to work 5 double crochet stitches. Okay, and that is your very first scale. So now if we're looking at our project flat, you should have something that looks like this. And to start our next scale, we're actually going to skip over this increase and work around the posts of this one. And then once we finish this scale, we'll skip this, work around this one, skip this one, work around the last one. And we're going to chain one, then rotate our work. Remember, we're skipping this increase, and we're going to reach over and wrap around the post of this double crochet. This is the hardest part of the stitch, is getting the hang of rotating your project and knowing which double crochet posts that we're going to work around. So now we're going to chain one, rotate our work again. Now we're looking at the second post on this increase, and we're going to insert in between and work another 5 double crochets. Chain one, and we're skipping this increase and we're going to work around this post on this one. So rotate our work and work 5 double crochets. Chain one, rotate again. Now we're going to work on the second post of this increase and 5 double crochets around it. Chain one, skip the next increase, and we're going to work around this final one. Chain one, and 5 more double crochets to finish this last scale. Okay, so now this is what we should have. We've got 4 scales. If you did the same amount of chains that I did, you might have more depending on your multiple of 6. So this is the first row of scales. Now we're going to go onto another base row. So we're going to chain 3, and this is again is a double crochet. This time we're going to work in the center of our first scale. So insert your hook and we're going to double crochet. Now you notice I didn't chain 2 or anything between these two, and there's a reason for that. So make sure that you just do the chain 3 to start and then this double crochet in the center. Then we're going to chain 2. And now we're going to kind of pull our scales apart to look at this increase that we skipped. And we're going to yarn over and insert our hook in between those increases. And we're going to work around not only the increases, but this chain 1 right here to double crochet. And then we're going to double crochet again for another increase. Then chain 2. We're going to skip over to the center of this scale, insert, and work 2 double crochets. Chain 2. Pull apart your scales and insert your hook in between the 2 double crochets from the first row. chain 2, work into that next scale, chain 2, work into the increase, chain 2, and finally work into that last scale. And this is going to be your very first base row in the repeat. So you'll notice that your stitch count is going to alternate because this scale counts as 1 stitch and the chain 1 counts as a stitch. So your stitch count for this row is going to be much smaller than your stitch count for the base rows, because in this case we're counting the double crochets and the chains. So just keep that in mind as you're working through a pattern or as you're messing around with this stitch. Now we're going to do our next scale row, and this time we're only going to chain 1. And the reason for that is because we don't want to work scales on top of scales. We're going to work in alternates. So for this row, we're going to skip the very first increase and we're going to work around the second one. So this first post of the second increase is where we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, and we're going to work 5 double crochet stitches. It'd help if I was actually working double crochets and not half doubles. Oops. And it's just a personal preference, but I like to actually kind of fold the work over a little bit so that I can make this post pop out more. That's just how I hold the project. You can find whatever method works best for you. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We got 5. Now we're going to chain 1, rotate the work. Now we're going to work around the second post of that increase and do another 5 double crochet stitches. So the actual scales don't change, it's just where you place them that changes through the alternating rows. So now we're going to chain 1, skip the increase that's over the previous scale, and work into the next one. Okay, so in this one, now we only have 3 scales, and you'll notice that we still have this gap over here. So after this final scale, we're going to chain 1, and now I'm looking at the back of the work, and I'm going to slip stitch into this gap right here between the initial chain 3 and our first double crochet. So you should have something that looks like this. Now, to start our next base row, we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to double crochet into this same gap right here where we just did our slip stitch. And this counts as our first increase of the row because our chain 3 is a double crochet and then this is a double crochet. Now we're going to chain 2. We're going to hop over to the center of this first scale and do a double crochet increase. Chain 2. Pull our scales apart and we're going to insert into the increase below. Chain 2. Increase into the scale, chain 2, work our increase into the increase below, chain 2, work our increase into the scale, chain 2. Make sure you don't forget this last one because there is an increase right here. So we're going to work it in between this increase at the end. There you have it. So that was the final row of the repeat, and if you want to keep repeating this pattern back and forth, you'll just start back at the row at the top. Technically that was row 5, but like I said, it is the 4th row in the repeat. So if you wanted to continue, you'd start with the chain 3 and then working that very first crocodile stitch or scale into the first increase. And this is what you would have after working the first row of that repeat again, with these scales across. So you can see they alternate back and forth with 4 and then 3 and 4 and then 3. I highly recommend making a sample out of some kind of scrap yarn that you're not super fond of and just practicing the motion of this stitch, of working down a post and then up and around the other side, down and up again. Because once you get the hang of how to kind of rotate your work and position these stitches, there's so many possibilities for alterations that you can do. So for example, if you like this, but you're like, man, this is just really pointy and it's really big. So here's an easy way that you can alter that. I'll show you. Why not use smaller stitches? So I'll set this sample aside. This is our main one. What if we wanted to use half double crochets instead of double crochets? Well, we're going to slip stitch, and just like before, we're going to chain a multiple of 6, but this time, instead of adding 4 chains, we're only going to add 3, because the chain to create the height of a half double crochet is smaller than the chain to create the height of a double crochet. So I'm going to let's chain 18, and then I'll add 3 stitches. Okay, so I've got my initial chain, and now we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with this sample, and instead of working in the 4th chain from the hook, we're going to work in the 3rd chain from the hook, and we're going to do a half double crochet, and the chain 2 right here is going to count as our half double crochet stitch. So we can chain 2, skip 2, and work a half double crochet increase. And repeat that all the way across. So just like in our first sample, this is going to be our base row. And then just like again on our first sample, we would create scales by this time chaining 2 instead of 3, because that's going to be our first our first half double crochet. And now the posts are a little smaller, so it's a little harder to see in between them, but it's the same concept. So since we're using a smaller stitch and we're going to make smaller scales, we're going to do less half double crochets than we did on the double crochet sample. So let's only work 4, or in this case 3, since that chain is initial half double crochet. There, so we've got our 4 half doubles. And now what if we wanted to make it pointier the same way that this one is? Well, there's a couple of ways. You could add more than just a chain 1. You could do a chain 2 or chain 3, but that would leave kind of a rounder gap. What I really like to do, and what I did on this sample, is a small picot stitch. So I did chain 2, and then I slip stitched into the first chain. And then I'm going to rotate around so that I'm looking at the second half double crochet post right here. And I'm going to work 4 more half double crochet stitches. Okay, so that is your first one, and it doesn't seem very pointy right now, but once you get working a couple of stitches, it starts to become a lot more obvious. So this was made with DK weight yarn and a very smaller hook. It's like a 2.5 millimeter, whereas again, this is a 6. But that's just one way that you can alternate it. And then it's the exact same steps as we did here. So you would work your alternating scales into, you'd skip one, work a scale here, skip one, work a scale, skip one, work a scale. Then you have another base row, scales, another base row, and scales. So it's all the same concept, but you can modify how the actual stitches look by changing the number of half double crochets or double crochets you work here, and you can make it pointier by using picot stitches or chains. But let's say you wanted to make it really small and use single crochet stitches. Well, let's give that a try. I'm going to frog this right here. All right, so let's do, again, we're going to chain a multiple of 6. So I'll do 18, and then I'll only add 2 chains to that. So here's my initial chain. Now in the second chain from the hook, we're going to single crochet. And then follow the same process. We're going to chain 2, skip 2, and then work an increase, single crochet increases, so 2 single crochet in the same stitch, chain 2, skip 2. All right, so you have something that looks like this. And now the problem with using single crochets is that the actual post of the stitch is very, very small. So you'd essentially be inserting your hook like through the stitch like that. And it is a little bit more difficult to see, but if you're going for very small scales, this is definitely doable. It's just a little bit more difficult. So we would chain 1 to start our first scale row, and then insert our hook in between the 2 single crochet stitches. And then let's say only work 2 more for a total of 3. And then I think it would be good to just do a chain 1 for this. But like I said, you can always play around with doing picots, multiple chains, whatever you'd prefer. Then I'm going to work around that second post, another 3 single crochet, chain 1, skip the next increase, work around the second one. Okay, it's a little hard to tell because I worked another foundation or base row on top of this one, but this is kind of what your scales would look like if you're using only single crochet stitches. You can see it's significantly smaller than the double crochet. That's just one of the many ways that you can modify this crocodile stitch right here, or dragon scale stitch, whatever you prefer to call it. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you would like to check out the written version with all of the written out instructions for each of these samples, you can check it out on my blog. I have it linked in the description box below. And if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up so other people can find it. And if you want, I'd love if you'd subscribe to the channel so you never miss a video. And I'll see you next time. Have a good day. Bye.